Moving on to page 3 of the contract, the due diligence paragraph from before about the seller's disclosure spills in a little bit onto the top of page 3. Of course, make sure you fill in your address at the top of the page as well. You have the option to select whether or not you have or have not received the seller's disclosure yet. So if you have, select box A. If you have not, then you would select box B. Now, if you have not received the seller's disclosures yet, the seller will have 72 hours from the time of acceptance to deliver those seller's disclosures, 3 days rather, not 72 hours. It used to be 72 hours. They now have 3 days to deliver the seller disclosures to the buyer to review, and then the buyer would then have 1 day to review those documents. And if in that 1 day period there's something on that seller's disclosure that the buyer does not like, the buyer has the right to terminate the contract and retain their earnest money. They would not have to move forward with an inspection or anything like that. So it is in your seller's best interest to have those disclosures as readily available as possible, so that way you just eliminate a chance that a buyer would walk away once you're under contract. If the house was built before 1978, you can have the option to inspect for lead paint. However, if it is not that new, then you would select, or not that old, you would select box A. If it is built before 78, you can either opt to not have a lead paint inspection or have a lead-based paint inspection within 10 days or however many days that you choose. So if you choose to have a lead paint inspection, I would recommend having that mirror your normal inspection period. So if you say 10 days, go with 10. If you say 14, go with 14. I will say in my career in real estate, I have never had anyone do a lead paint inspection. However, never say never. Obviously, it is something people can do and have chosen to do, or it wouldn't be in this contract. So this buyer is opting to not have a lead paint inspection. In regards to your actual inspection of the property, so paragraph 10 outlines all of the legal jargon in regards to how you can inspect a home. So it indicates that the buyer is able to hire whomever they wish to do an inspection. It needs to be a licensed professional in order for them to terminate based on the inspection contingency. It says, as the seller, it's an important term to present, that the seller will allow access to the property and that they will make sure that things like attic accesses, crawl spaces in cellars, things like that, those are all accessible to the inspector. And if they are not accessible, like say if you have an attic access section that's in a closet and there's just a ton of junk in the closet and the inspector can't get to it, the seller will need to remove all of those items and then allow the inspector to come back at the seller's expense. So make sure that your seller grants access to all areas of the home and that, walls and spaces like that are easily able to be inspected. It releases liability to the agents because you are not the owner of the house. You don't have any knowledge of any of these defects, so there's a release of liability in regards to inspections and disclosures of the property itself. Moving on to the square footage contingency. Now, our old contracts used to give us an option of when we can do this. If you want to verify the square footage, this contract says it will be within 15 days. Now, if you don't like that, you have the right to scratch this out and say what we used to be able to do, which would be, say, put this box here, make this a little bit bigger, with appraisal. That way you aren't out there measuring the home. Now, if your buyer doesn't care if the square footage is off, then you can leave this the way that it's written. However, if you've got a weirdly shaped home that you're not sure if what's being advertised is actually what's there, it might be in your best interest to verify the square footage with the appraisal or go out and measure it yourself or hire your own independent person to come measure. But what this paragraph says is that the home has to be within 10% of the advertised square footage on the MLS. So if it's 1,000 square feet, it can be 1,010 or 990 square feet and still be compliant within this standard. However, if the appraiser measures it and it's 900 square feet, then that is obviously a pretty big discrepancy, and the buyer has the right to decide if they even want to move forward with the property when it's that much of a difference. And I just realized that I failed at math. So let me try that again. If it's 1,000 square foot house and it could be up to 1,100 and down to 900 square feet and still be within the within the ANSI standard. However, if it is actually 800 square feet or 1,200 square feet, for instance, then the buyer would have the right to terminate the contract because that is more than a 10% discrepancy. So forgive me, it is, as you can see by the clock in the corner, late in the evening, and math has never been my strong suit. So the point is, it can be within 10% and still be valid within the terms of the contract. Personally, I have never had anybody complain about the square footage. However, it's in here. Somebody did, somebody might. So just make sure your buyer understands that they do have the right to verify the size of the home.